Imagine you have exactly 60 days to buy a near $1 million asset that you have literally never seen in person.
Oh, that sounds terrifying.
Right, and this asset is located in a time zone that's 6 hours behind you. Plus, you have to execute this legally binding high-stakes transaction while you are simultaneously packing up your entire life, your family, and your career into cardboard boxes.
Yeah, for most people listening to this right now, that sounds like a full-blown financial panic attack.
Exactly. But for the United States military, it's just a Tuesday.
It really is. It is this phenomenal logistical puzzle because you're taking one of the most stressful events in a human life, which is moving, and placing it in a pressure cooker of unmovable deadlines and extreme geographic constraints.
And not just any geography either. Today is March 30, 2026, and we are plunging into the highly specific, incredibly intense world of military relocations.
What the military calls a PCS, right?
Yes, a permanent change of station. Specifically, we're talking about a PCS to Oahu, Hawaii, which, as we know, consistently ranks as one of the most punishingly expensive housing markets on the planet.
Oh, absolutely brutal.
And our guide for today's deep dive is this really fascinating document published by the Christie and Austin Home Group. It's called the Step-by-Step VA Home Buying Guide for Oahu 2026.
It basically functions as a hyperlocal survival manual. We're looking at exactly how service members take this daunting nightmare of a cross-ocean move and transform it into a masterclass in real estate strategy.
By using some very specialized benefits and intensely localized knowledge.
Exactly.
So to really grasp the mechanics of this, the guide anchors us with a real-world avatar. Let's meet Staff Sergeant Marcus Rivera.
Okay.
He's 28 years old, an infantryman currently stationed at Fort Liberty in North Carolina. He's moving with his wife, Danielle, and their 4-year-old daughter, Mia.
A young family.
Yeah. They've been renting a place off-post in Fayetteville for the last 3 years, and they just received orders to report to the 25th Infantry Division at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii by July of this year.
Wow, so they are first-time homebuyers staring down the barrel of the 2026 Oahu market from several thousand miles away.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can even begin to debate where Marcus and Danielle are going to live, we have to figure out how a 28-year-old soldier and his young family can even participate in the Hawaii real estate market.
Right, the entry barrier is huge.
It is. If you are a civilian looking at the sticker shock of a standard Oahu single-family home, the math just doesn't seem to work on a military salary.
No, from a purely civilian underwriting perspective, it shouldn't work at all. But this is where the mechanics of military financing fundamentally alter the landscape.
Yeah.
We have to look at the superpower that is the VA loan, combined with the 2026 Basic Allowance for Housing.
The BAH.
Exactly, the BAH.
Right, because if you or I want to buy an $850,000 house, traditional wisdom says we need to bring 20% down to avoid throwing away cash on private mortgage insurance.
Which is a massive chunk of change.
It's $170,000 in cash. Saving that kind of liquid capital while paying rent in North Carolina would take decades.
Easily.
But the VA loan operates like a financial teleporter. It allows military families to completely bypass that massive civilian hurdle of saving up a 20% down payment.
That financial teleporter analogy is perfect because of how the moving parts function. The VA loan allows for 0 down payment.
0.
0. Meaning Marcus can finance 100% of the purchase price.
That's incredible.
And there is absolutely no private mortgage insurance, which instantly saves them hundreds of dollars a month that would otherwise just vanish into thin air.
Wow.
And on top of that, the VA funding fee, which is normally a hefty closing cost, can either be rolled directly into the total loan amount or waived entirely if the service member has a service-connected disability rating.
So the entry barrier, that massive pile of cash usually required at the door, is completely removed.
Complete.
But I mean, he still has to make the monthly payment, right?
He does. And what's fascinating here is how the lenders calculate that monthly affordability.
Yeah.
Lenders who specialize in VA loans, they don't just look at Marcus's base infantry pay in a vacuum. They factor in his BAH.
Ah, the housing allowance.
Right. For an E6 with dependents in Oahu in 2026, the military provides a substantial, guaranteed, location-specific, and untaxed housing allowance. Untaxed. That BAH is the engine. The lenders know exactly how to underwrite that specific allowance into the affordability calculation.
Which turns what looks like an impossible financial leap into a completely realistic 60 to 90-day closing timeline.
Precisely.
So armed with that financial teleporter, Marcus and Danielle are suddenly holding a pre-approval letter for up to $850,000.
Which is a strong position.
Yeah. Which brings us to the next massive hurdle. Now that they have the capital, where do they deploy it? Because this guide immediately introduces the ultimate Oahu real estate tug-of-war.
Yes, the brutal trade-off.
Exactly, the painful choice between the length of your commute and the square footage of your house.
It is the defining dilemma of living on the island. You have a finite amount of land, concentrated employment hubs, and, well, a giant mountain range dictating the highway infrastructure.
So you basically have to choose your pain.
You really do.
Let's look at the options the guide lays out. First, you have a neighborhood called Mililani. The guide refers to it as the Goldilocks zone.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, you're looking at a hyper-efficient 10 to 15-minute commute to Schofield Barracks. The schools, like Mililani Waina Elementary, are top-rated.
Highly sought after.
Right. And it has these incredible community recreation centers, pools, and streets lined with mature plumeria trees.
It sounds idyllic.
It does. But you pay for that convenience. Yeah. A single-family home here in 2026 runs between $750,000 and $950,000.
Meaning, for their $850,000 maximum budget, Marcus and Danielle are likely looking at an older, maybe a three-bedroom home that will eat up nearly every dollar of their pre-approval.
Right. It's a tighter fit. But then the guide pans the camera over to the Ewa Plain, neighborhoods like Ewa Beach and Kapolei.
Ah, the space option.
Yes, this is the space option. Out there, your money goes significantly further. For $650,000 to $850,000, you are not settling for a modest three-bedroom.
No, you're getting a lot more.
You are stepping into massive four-bedroom, 2,000-plus square foot modern homes. We are talking builds from the 2000s or newer central or split air conditioning, large master suites, and actual two-car garages.
If you're sitting on your couch in North Carolina scrolling through listings on your phone, Ewa Beach looks like the undisputed winner. You get substantially more house for less money.
I mean, honestly, it's like choosing between a luxury SUV that you're stuck in for 2 hours a day versus a comfy sedan parked right next to your office.
That's a great way to put it.
But give me the luxury SUV with the big yard and the modern kitchen. Why wouldn't every single family just take the bigger house and endure the drive?
Well, because you aren't just enduring a drive, you are battling a geographic bottleneck. This is where the local intelligence of the guide is so critical.
Okay, tell me more.
On paper, sure, at 2:00 p.m. on a Sunday, the drive from Ewa Beach to Schofield Barracks is maybe 25 to 35 minutes.
Which isn't bad.
No, not at all. But military personnel don't commute on Sunday afternoons. They have to report for morning formation during peak rush hour, alongside thousands of other soldiers trying to get through the exact same security gates at the exact same time.
Oh, wow. Which means all those people in Ewa Beach are funneling onto the same exact roads.
Precisely. The route from the Ewa Plain requires taking the H1 freeway eastbound, which is already heavily congested with Honolulu-bound traffic.
Right, everyone heading to the city.
Yes, and then you have to merge onto the H2 freeway northbound toward the base. That specific interchange is notorious.
A choke point.
A massive choke point. It turns a 25-minute drive into a 45 to 60-plus minute soul-crushing crawl.
And if you do the math on that, let's say an hour each way, that is 10 hours a week. Over 40 hours a month just staring at the bumper in front of you.
Yeah. And for an infantryman like Marcus, who is already working long, physically exhausting hours, adding a 2-hour daily commute is a massive tax.
A tax on his life, really.
It's a tax on his physical recovery, his marriage, and his time with his daughter. When you factor in the psychological weight of that commute, the extra bedroom in Ewa Beach suddenly loses its appeal.
That makes a lot of sense.
That friction is exactly why Marcus and Danielle ultimately reject the Ewa Plain. They ruthlessly prioritize their daily lifestyle and their time over sheer square footage.
So Mililani is for families prioritizing the short commute in the school districts, and Ewa is for families who absolutely need the space.
Correct.
But here's where it gets really interesting. What about the service members who don't fit into those two neat boxes?
Right, because not everyone has a spouse and a 4-year-old.
Exactly. The guide explores entirely different strategies for buyers with entirely different constraints, like pure budget, or rental investments, or just wanting brand new construction.
The Oahu market is highly segmented, and different pockets serve very specific military buyer profiles. Like if we look at a town like Waipahu, The dynamic shifts entirely.
Yeah, Waipahu is fascinating. The homes are generally older, the lots are tighter, and the commute to Schofield is a middling 20 to 30 minutes.
Not great, but not terrible.
Right. But single-family homes there are sitting in the $600,000. And the guide points out a huge strategic advantage. Waipahu has massive, relentless rental demand. It frames it as the perfect buy and hold portfolio builder.
Or, consider the completely opposite end of the spectrum. Buyers who want zero maintenance.
Ah, the new builds.
Yes. The guide highlights Koa Ridge and Hawapali, which are brand new master planned communities. Koa Ridge single-family homes are running $800,000 to well over $1 million. But everything is pristine.
So you aren't worrying about replacing a corroded 1980s electrical panel.
Exactly, or dealing with aging plumbing. And then Hopefully offers new townhomes in the $550,000 to $700,000 range, situated strategically near the future Skyline rail stations.
But I want to zoom in on a hyper-specific detail the guide mentions about another town entirely. Wahiawa.
Okay, Wahiawa.
Geographically, it's the absolute closest to the base. Literally a 5-minute drive to the Schofield Gate.
Very close.
It's the cheapest single-family option, starting in the low $500,000. It has this historic plantation-era charm. But then the guide casually drops a technical term regarding its older housing stock. It warns buyers to be prepared for single-wall construction. Hold on,
right.
but does this literally mean that just one single piece of wood separates the family sitting in their living room from the outside element?
It is entirely literal, yes.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Traditional Hawaiian plantation-style homes built in the mid-20th century were often constructed using single-wall techniques, typically utilizing redwood tongue-and-groove boards.
But how does that even work? How does a house with no insulation, no drywall, and no interior studs pass a strict VA appraisal? If you tried to buy a single-wall house in North Carolina, the VA would laugh you out of the bank.
They absolutely would, because a single-wall home in North Carolina would be a freezing, unlivable hazard in the winter.
Right.
But the VA appraisal process is designed to ensure safety, sanitation, and structural soundness based on regional standards.
Ah, regional.
Yes. Hawaii's climate is so uniquely temperate year-round that thick insulation wasn't historically necessary. The local VA appraisers understand this context.
So they aren't treating it like a mainland house.
Exactly. They aren't expecting a 1950s Wahiawa home to meet modern mainland insulation codes. They're checking to make sure the redwood hasn't been decimated by termites and that the roof doesn't leak.
That is wild to wrap your head around if you're a first-time buyer flying in from the mainland. But, it opens up a really fascinating door.
It does, because if we connect this to the bigger picture, you start to uncover the hidden wealth-building engine of the military lifestyle.
Okay, how so?
Well, a junior enlisted soldier, maybe 22 years old, might buy one of those older single-wall homes in Wahiawa or a tighter property in Waipahu simply because it fits their lower BAH budget right now.
It gets them in the game.
Exactly. Gets them in the game. And Hawaii has exceptionally low property taxes for owner-occupants thanks to specific state homeowner exemptions.
Nice.
Furthermore, because there is a constant, never-ending influx of military personnel rotating onto the island every single month, there is a guaranteed massive rental demand.
Oh, I see where this is going.
So that 22-year-old soldier lives in that Wahiawa home for 3 years. When the military eventually PCSes them to their next duty station in Texas or Germany, they don't sell.
They keep the home and rent it out to the next soldier arriving on the island.
Exactly. And the new soldier's BAH covers the old soldier's mortgage.
Wow. So the military is basically inadvertently minting real estate investors by forcing them to optimize for extreme geographic and financial constraints.
That's spot on. They are using the VA loan entitlement as a strategic investment vehicle, building a lucrative, cash-flowing real estate portfolio one duty station at a time. Settling for a smaller, older home isn't a defeat. It is a highly calculated financial play.
Okay, so knowing that Wahiawa is essentially an investor's stepping stone and Ewa Beach is a traffic trap, you can see exactly why a young family like Marcus and Danielle are pushed inevitably toward the Goldilocks zone of Mililani.
Right. It fits their specific needs.
They prioritize the 12-minute commute and the school district. They find a 3-bedroom, single-family home in Mililani town, listed right at $825,000, and they decide to pull the trigger.
A huge moment.
But this brings us to the most mind-bending part of this entire guide, the mechanics of the remote real estate reality.
The logistics of buying from afar?
Right. How do you actually execute an $825,000 transaction when you're trapped in a different time zone?
Well, you have to rely on a heavily systematized process, and it usually starts with what the military calls permissive TDY, or temporary duty.
Which, the guide explains, is essentially a highly compressed, military-sanctioned house hunting trip. Marcus gets 10 days to fly to Oahu.
Just 10 days.
Think about the stress of that.
Yeah.
He flies 6 time zones away, fights through the jet lag, and has to physically drive the H1 to H2 route during morning rush hour just to verify the commute times.
He has to see it for himself.
Yeah. He walks the neighborhoods, looks at the homes, and ultimately they write the offer and get under contract for $825,000 while he's on the island.
But once that contract is signed, Marcus flies back to Fayetteville. And that is when the real Hawaii-specific logistical gauntlet begins. Because the transaction doesn't pause just because the buyer went home.
Right. Now they have to navigate these mandatory local contingencies from thousands of miles away. The guide outlines the big ones. First, the VA appraisal.
Which is completely non-negotiable.
And it takes an agonizing 2 to 3 weeks on Oahu because of the limited pool of certified appraisers on the island.
It's a waiting game.
Then you have mandatory termite inspections. Because, well, it's a tropical island, and termites are a constant threat.
Always.
You have to wire 1 to 3% in earnest money. And then there's a massive procedural difference. Hawaii's an escrow state.
Which is a fundamental shift if you are used to buying property on the East Coast.
Yeah. In North Carolina, you sit at a big mahogany table with a closing attorney who hands you a pen, explains the documents, and you sign your life away.
Very traditional.
But the guide explains that in Hawaii's escrow system, it's instead this decentralized web of third parties. There is no central attorney table.
No.
This means Marcus and Danielle are relying on a complex chain of digital communications, utilizing local notaries back in Fayetteville to securely sign and overnight physical documents across the Pacific Ocean just to hit legally binding deadlines.
It introduces incredible friction. If a single document is delayed by FedEx or a signature is missed, the entire 60-day timeline can collapse. And remember the human element here. All of this complex legal coordination is happening while Marcus is tied up in the bureaucratic maze of officially detaching from his unit.
Right, turning in gear, signing endless out-processing forms.
Exactly. While Danielle is left to pack the entire contents of their house into boxes.
The stress levels have to be off the charts. But the part that gives me visceral anxiety is the home inspection.
Oh, the remote inspection.
Yes. The guide mentions the inspector finds some minor issues on the Mililani property, a leaky outdoor faucet and some weathered caulking around the window frames. Standard stuff for an older home.
Very common.
They end up negotiating a $2,500 repair credit from the seller to fix it. But they're doing all of this via video call.
Yep.
Wait, they're negotiating thousands of dollars over weathered caulking based on a FaceTime stream? How terrifying is it to rely on a video call on a tiny smartphone screen to inspect weathered window caulking on an $825,000 asset?
This is extremely nerve-wracking.
How does the buyer even convey the smell of mold or the structural feel of a window frame? Through an iPhone lens, you were spending $825,000 based on a 6-inch screen. I get nervous buying a used car I can actually kick the tires on.
It sounds completely reckless from the outside, which is exactly why the source text beats the drum so loudly on one specific non-negotiable rule.
The agent.
Yes, the absolute necessity of a hyper-local real estate agent.
The guide specifically warns against using a mainland referral network or even an agent who just covers the whole island generally.
Because a generalist cannot save you when you are buying blind over FaceTime. You need someone who knows the 10-minute radius around the military base intimately.
Someone who actually knows the area.
Right. You need an agent who knows the subtle microclimate differences between Mililani Town and Mililani Mocha without having to look at a zoning map.
Because otherwise you're just guessing.
Precisely. When you are buying remotely, signing life-altering debt agreements via DocuSign, and coordinating across a 6-hour time difference, that profound trust in local expertise is the only lubricant that keeps this remote closing machinery from seizing up.
They really become your proxy.
Exactly. The agent on the ground becomes the family's physical proxy. They're the ones actually standing in the living room, smelling the air, feeling the window frames, coordinating with the termite inspector, and aggressively pushing the escrow company to hit that crucial 30 to 45-day closing window.
Because if the machinery breaks down, Marcus and Danielle arrive in Hawaii with a 4-year-old daughter, a rental car full of suitcases, and literally nowhere to live.
The margin for error is effectively zero.
The stakes aren't just financial, they're deeply personal.
They are. But what the guide demonstrates is that because military families lean heavily on this hyper-local expertise, and because they utilize the established systems and financial tools designed for them, the seemingly impossible becomes a repeatable process.
And it does work. The guide brings Marcus and Danielle's story to this incredibly satisfying resolution. Let's fast forward to July.
Okay.
After months of remote coordination, packing, and cross-country travel, Marcus, Danielle, and little Mia finally land at the airport on a Saturday morning.
Exhausted, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. They pick up their rental car, load up their bags, and drive up the H2 freeway. They take the Mililani exit, drive past those plumeria trees, and pull right into the driveway of their very first home.
And because the system worked, the keys are already there, waiting for them in the lockbox.
That must be the best feeling.
The transaction officially closed and recorded remotely in early June, a full month before their boots ever touched Hawaiian soil.
Mia immediately runs into her new, fully fenced backyard. Within a week, the moving trucks deliver their furniture. Marcus makes that hyper-efficient 12-minute drive to the Schofield front gate to report for duty with his new unit.
It's seamless.
It is. Danielle finds her new local coffee shop, and Mia is already taking swimming lessons at the Mililani Town Association Recreation Center. They bypassed the noise, they understood their specific trade-offs, and they are finally home.
It is a powerful narrative, precisely because it strips away the intimidation factor. It proves that the Oahu market, as complex and expensive as it is, functions exactly as designed when you pull the right levers and trust the experts on the ground.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, even if you never plan on putting on a military uniform or moving to the Pacific?
That's the real question.
Whether you are buying a condo in Chicago or a ranch in Texas, this guide is a remarkable testament to the power of extreme clarity. It shows how specialized financial tools, a ruthless prioritization of your daily lifestyle over mere square footage, and leveraging hyperlocal expertise can make this seemingly impossible completely achievable.
Absolutely.
Marcus and Danielle didn't just buy a house. They executed a strategic deployment of capital across an ocean, blindfolded by distance, and they won.
They optimized for their reality rather than fighting against it.
Which leaves me with this final thought for you to mull over. We've just spent this time breaking down how this highly systematic remote buying PCS playbook works so seamlessly for military families.
Right.
They are negotiating repair credits over video calls, utilizing specialized loans, and closing across global time zones without ever sitting at a mahogany table with an attorney.
It's a completely different paradigm.
If the military has perfected this, could the broader civilian real estate market adopt these hyper-efficient remote-first tactics? What if the military's approach to frictionless, high-stakes relocation isn't just an anomaly born out of necessity? What if it's actually a preview of the future of the entire real estate industry?
It certainly makes you look at the traditional slow-moving civilian home buying process and wonder if we've been doing it all wrong this whole time.
It really does. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating mechanics of the Oahu housing market. Keep asking questions, keep looking at the bigger picture, and we will catch you on the next one.